100 is a really good value, that's an hour. Then that way you don't get lots of fake attacks, I guess, on your server that would cause it to think that it's being bombarded when it's got a high traffic load on the DNS, trying to resolve domains for 100,000 people at one time. So higher is usually better, but if you're changing your domain name over to a new IP address, definitely knock it down to a low value within a couple of days before you move your domain, because otherwise you'll probably sit there waiting for a couple of days before your domain points to the correct server. Moving on, now we get to go into all the different types of records. So I've already kind of hinted towards what the record types are. CNAME records are basically one domain that points to another domain. So madhouse.us is valid, www isn't. So CNAME will map this to whatever madhouse.us is, and it'll get its IP that way. A records go from domain name to an IP address directly. And S records are how you specify your name servers. So madhouse.us needs several domain server or name servers. So NS1 is just one of those servers. These servers also need to have an A record in order to work. And then you have your MX record, which is for mail. They typically have a priority in front of them. You can go from 0 to 99, and basically, mail servers are vital to the internet because we have email. If you've ever set up Google Apps for your domain, they give you about 10 or 15 servers that you can use, and then they give you priorities. The lower the priority, the sooner that server will get the mail if lower priority servers refuse your mail. So it's always difficult to have a couple mail servers running on your network that can accept mail for you, and then they can forward it off to another server which holds onto your physical email box and gives you access to it. PTR records are very important if you're using mail servers because they map an IP address to your domain. So let's say that Joe Blow gets into your system and they change your domain to point to a horrible IP address that's going to redirect you to a site that you don't want to be on. Basically, this here will tell most systems that are going to verify against the PTR record that, hey, this backwards lookup doesn't match what the forward lookup for A record says. So they'll say that, oh, this probably is a bad website to go to. Same thing with email. So basically, the A record and PTR records usually should match, especially if you're using email, but for most other things too. And your ISP or the number authority that assigns IP addresses are the only people who can control what this here points to. And that there is a real IP address for that house. And then we have text records for spam, which are basically text files that are put into DNS. So we can say what IP address servers can send mail for a domain. We can put encryption keys in there for email, lots of fun stuff. More DNS tools. There's DAG, which basically gives you everything about your domain name from a DNS server. So you query it for a domain, it pulls everything back for you. Here's a website that does DAG. NS lookup looks up DNS records, so you can do NS lookup madhouse.us, and it'll pull up all the A records or CNAME records and give you the IP address of the domain. Whois, there's a public Whois database, and if you actually go to whois.net and type in famousco.com, you'll get my real contact information. So when you register a domain, you have to give them real information. And if you give them fake information, they can probably go after you with a lawsuit. There is a private registration, but it costs more, and basically a company puts their real information there, and then they act as a proxy to you. So mail hints, mail servers are the worst thing I've ever had to configure. Text records are DNS-based, and there's two ways of doing it. Domain keys, which is kind of an encryption verification, and sender IP, which is kind of a DNS-only verification. But they both use text records. If you ever need to set up a mail server or make mail work for your domain, definitely put in a text record for SPF. which is your Sender Policy Framework. And here's a site that will automatically create your SPF test record for you. And once you go through that and verify the server, you shouldn't have problems sending to Yahoo and Googling, or Microsoft I've had problems with in the past because of the way they verify email. But you will run into problems unless you do set up your SPF record, because spam is a huge problem. But most mail servers and clients are what actually verify if the SPF record is correct, because it's not built into our mail protocols. So coming back to subdomains and clarification after covering DNS, WebLec, that's a physical subdomain, but it can point to the same location as famouso.com/WebLec. And actually in this case, they do point to the same location. Moving on, Google PageRank. So SEO is, search engine optimization, is a huge problem, and there's people who spend their lives working on it. It's basically a way to make your page show up before something else. So if you've ever gone to Google and you've tried Googling my name, interestingly enough, my blog comes up first. And actually it took me forever to get my site up above Facebook and LinkedIn. So they actually have better SEO and everything than I do. But I worked really hard at pulling myself up to the top of the Google search results. So basically, SEO and Google PageRank are some things that you should worry about if you're developing a website and you want to get traffic to your website. So PageRank can only be modified by Google in special cases because the security of a bad website happens to have a high PR for some reason, and we don't want it to show up at the top of the Google search listing and screw up everyone's computer because it happens to have a virus on it. But we can't modify the PageRank under normal circumstances. Google has special algorithms that rank pages based on how much traffic your website gets. Yes, they can do that. And it also depends on who the heck has links to your website. So PageRank tips, in my experience, definitely don't make anything hard to find on your website. If Google can't find stuff on your website, it decreases your PageRank significantly. Sometimes they'll even knock it down to nothing. And htaccess is really helpful if you need to move certain directories over, create a real one or a temporary redirect for Google, make things easier to find. So we'll cover that later. But basically, most of the time, if you have incoming traffic from websites, you want a single website link from another website. For example, CodeCall.net, which is a programming forum that I joined years ago, I got a link that gave me 30,000 backlinks to my website. And that actually hurt my PageRank. But later on, I changed it to where there was only one single link from CodeCall.net, which was on the home page back to my website. That single backlink actually helped me better than all the 30,000 backlinks, just because that's how Google works. So always look into, if you're going to buy advertisements from other sites, only buy one and have it on the prominent page. If you want to learn more about PageRank, here's a link for you. So hosting control panels, and this is quite interesting because there's a lot of them out there. I definitely didn't cover them all, but these are the ones that I've kind of used in the past. So the first one is cPanel, and we've probably gone into it in a lot of depth already, but I'll go back to it just to show you a little bit about how it works again. So basically, cPanel is this wonderful control panel that gives you control over your website. You can do things like spam filtering if you're doing stuff with email, webmail. They actually have nice webmail clients. Backups of your web space so that you can download them. Gives you statistics about your website, who's visiting your website, all of that. Gives you stuff about your transfer and disk space usage, which we'll get to in a little bit. A little bit about your MySQL disk space usage, ability to add subdomains, add your DNS records, and a lot of other stuff too. And typically with control panels, MySQL and there's another one, Prostra, which are both SQL servers or database servers. Those are typically integrated into your control panels where you can add a database and use your website to communicate with that database. So, moving on to the Plus one here, just want to give you an idea of what these look like. Plus does the same exact thing, except for it looks a little more window-ish. So if you look at Plus, I'm actually using their demo because I don't have a server right now. It looks very much like Windows Vista, and notice how long it takes to load. But it tries to make everything look really blingy and really easy for the user. So that's Plus. Usually slows down the server about twice as much as cPanel might, and it's not really the industry standard because they focus more on design and good style instead of functionality. So just putting that out there that you might have Plus. And then there's also Helm. So Helm is a little different because it's a Windows-only control panel. I actually want to make sure that I get the accounts right. So the accounts according to this are user, Helm, user, password. Helm is a little bit better. It's definitely improved over time because it was a lot crappier when we kind of used it. But notice how this here kind of looks like Windows XP. This is what you're going to get from Caravels and Plus, or Helm rather. But same thing, gives you access to everything about your website and allows you to modify anything on the back end. So nothing really different from the other two. Then we have Webmin, which is kind of a minimalistic version because it's free to everyone. So let's log into this demo just to give you an idea of what it looks like again. And notice how